As I was opening up this overgrown road, I started thinking. Yeah, I know, thinking can be a dangerous thing to do. Actually, I wasn't really thinking, I was just remembering. Remembering that a while back, someone in the comments asked me if I would do a video about the advantages of a wrap handle on a chainsaw. Now, wrap handles are usually found on the larger saws, usually for timber falling, usually for West Coast timber falling. I thought it was a good request, so we'll do it. Most chainsaws don't have a handle that wraps around on both sides. They only have the handle on this side, and this side is just flat. There's nothing here. Of course, I had to pick a spot with elk poo. It's actually hard to find a spot around here without it. Here it is from the other angle. Typically on a chainsaw, this would be a straight bar that goes up here, and all of this wouldn't be here. And that's what most people use. There is a good reason why most people don't have this type and they have the standard half wrap. It's because in most cutting needs, there's really no need for this. And if you don't need it, it can get in the way. It adds weight to the saw. You mostly find these on the bigger timber falling saws. That's where they really come in handy, is falling bigger timber, and especially in rugged terrain like we have in the Pacific Northwest. Let's see if we can find a tree around here somewhere, and I'll show you some examples of where these are an advantage and where they're really not. I thought I saw a tree somewhere around here. Oh, there's one. We're out in the forest and we found a tree. Who would have thunk it? To put some of your minds at ease, I'm not putting the nose of my saw in the dirt. It's actually a thick layer of woody duff, so it's not harming the chain. As I said earlier, most saws have the handle only on this side. So when falling a tree, it's easier to do it from this side of the tree. But if you wanted to come over and do it on this side, with a half wrap saw, you have nothing to hang on to over here. You have to hold it at kind of an awkward angle. It's heavy to hold it up that way, whereas if you can hold it right here, you have more strength holding it this way, and it's easier to cut it from this side. So that's one of the main advantages of the wrap handle. It gives you the ability to comfortably cut a tree from either side. If you're not in rugged terrain, there's really no reason you can't just come over here and cut it from this side. On a tree like this, there's really no advantage to being over there. So someone with just a half wrap handle, it's no big deal. All you have to do is cut the tree from this side. But in the rare case that you really needed to be on this side, it's not that big of a deal to just hold the handle like this to get yourself started. At least that is for people who do those goofy top notches when they cut the saw. Because after you cut your first cut, you can come up here, it's easy to hold the handle while you do your top notch. And then you cut a big notch out of your good piece of log instead of the stump. But around here, we like to take that notch out of our stump. So after we do our first cut, that's really hard to have to get the saw like that without having a handle here. But if you have a handle, it makes it much easier to do your Humboldt undercut. That is where the wrap handle really shines, is if you're doing Humboldt undercuts on larger timber where you sometimes need to be on this side of the tree. So why would you need to cut it on this side instead of just coming over here where you have no problem doing a Humboldt undercut with a half wrap handle? Well, let's go see if we can find another tree and I'll give you an example. Hey, look, another one. What do you know? Okay, so let's pretend we're cutting this tree down. We start our cut over here. Well, this is a 32-inch bar, and it's not going to go all the way through this tree. The tree's too big. Well, after I cut on this side, as far as the bar will reach, I'm going to want to come over this side and finish it off over here. And that's where the wrap handle is going to really come into play, especially when it's time to do the undercut. So that's one example when you have to do both sides because the tree is too big for your bar. This is just one reason why we West Coast guys use these ridiculous 32 and longer bars. Let's go find another example. Oh, hey, look, we found another tree out in the forest. Two of them, right next to each other. Huh, how about that? Must be our lucky day. Now imagine, for example, aliens from outer space came in their spaceship. They have bad attitudes, especially toward redwood trees, And for no good reason, they blasted the top out of this one with the blaster on their spaceship. What do you do when that happens? Well, you might as well take this tree since the top got blown out of it. That tree's fine, so you want to leave it. But in order to get this one out, we need to follow it in that direction because that's the direction that's easier to get the logs out. If we follow it that way, it's going to go down into a canyon. We can't follow it that way because that one's in the way. We don't want to follow it that way because there's a bunch of good trees over there. We don't want to crush them. With aliens flying around blasting the top out of trees, we need to keep all the good ones we can because that's what we have. But in order to cut it down that way, we need to make the undercut right here. And to do that, this tree's in the way of the power head. We can't cut very deep into the tree because we'll run into this one with the power head on the saw. But there's an easy solution, which is to cut it from this side, which you can do with a half wrap handle just fine. When it comes to doing the undercut, it's just an awkward way to have to hold the saw. You can do it just fine, but it makes it much nicer when you have this handle right here to hold on to. It just gives you more options. And this was a nice redwood tree. I don't know why those aliens need to be that way. Apparently they didn't get the memo that says you don't just go around blasting the tops out of other people's redwood trees. It's just not nice. There's the remains of the top of it right there. They didn't even take the top, they just blasted it out and left it. Then branches over here that came down in the blast. I'm sure none of this had anything to do with the snow and windstorm we had over the winter. Let's go look at another type of example. Stupid aliens. Hey look, we found another one, but this one's on a steep slope. It's so steep here, I can't even get into the picture from down below it. If I need the tree to go that way, whoa, toward you, this is tough. I might be able to get the chainsaw up here and follow it in this really precarious position. But that would be hard. Not to mention, it's very dangerous to be below a tree that you're falling on a steep slope. Stay. If I can get on the upper side of it, it's a much better place to work from. This is another example of why it's good to be able to cut on both sides of the tree. I could do it with a half wrap saw just fine. The undercut, it's awkward, but I can do it. But it really is nice to have the ability, when you're in a precarious situation, to have that handle on this side, especially when doing that undercut. In steep terrain like this, having a handle on both sides gives you a lot more options. Let's get down from this place before I fall down. It's really steep. Whoa. Oh, hey, look, we found another tree. This one is an example of where the wrap handle might get in the way. This is a good classic example of the type where it would get in the way, especially for those guys who like to do those goofy notches from above. A lot of those guys who like to do those goofy top-down notches like to cut low stumps. Some even like to cut them flush with the ground. This handle over here gets in the way of that. With the half wrap handles, there's nothing over here, so you can cut flush with the ground, but with this you can't. I'm losing 2 or 3 inches here. Well, there's the disadvantage of the wrap handle. If you need to cut up flush against something, you can't do it very well because this gets in the way and you lose about 3 inches. Trying to think of the other disadvantages. Little extra weight. I told you thinking's dangerous. Now I'm stuck in a thinking loop. The other disadvantage, let's see, I think I mentioned you can't cut as low of stumps with this. And the other disadvantage, I guess that wraps up this video. Okay, one more thing. Some of us like to pick on those goofy notches that are cut from the top down. Is it because we're jealous because the people who do that work on terrain that's easy to work on, it's not steep? And because they have all those nice hardwoods, those nice valuable hardwoods that make good lumber? No comment. Even though I'm having a difficult time coming up with any other disadvantages to the wrap handle, the reality is, for most users, it's just not necessary. These examples where I showed are not that common for most users. And when you do run into one of those situations, even with the half wrap handle, you can still manage to get the job done. For a timber faller in the Pacific Northwest, yes, they definitely are a big advantage. Someone else who has different cutting needs than I do might be able to come up with many disadvantages to this style. There's a concept. Different people have different needs. Who would have thunk it? That's the extent of my knowledge on the subject. Although when I turn the camera off, I'll probably think of some more things. But maybe this is good enough for now. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.